Hello, hello. Welcome to tonight's Facebook Live event. I'm just going to give it a little bit more time to see if more people show up. So we'll wait a couple minutes before we get started, but just hello from me in my kitchen. Tonight we're going to be talking about eating more plants, and I'll be taking people through a plant-based recipe just as an example of how eating a meal that's all plants can be very yummy as well as very healthy. Hello! If you have any questions while I'm doing this live, feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll try to get to them either as we go or I can respond to them after. But yeah, just to recap, if anybody here is just joining, we're going to be talking about plant-based eating. Not necessarily like going full vegetarian, full vegan, but just some tips and tricks about incorporating more plants in our everyday lives and in our diets more often. Just some things that can be really good for us, but sometimes kind of daunting to think about and plan out strategies to turn that into fruition. Okay, so I'll just wait maybe 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we'll get started, and I'll kind of start the cooking at the same time as we talk about some of the reasons why we love plants in our diet. Hello, hi Danielle, hi Brenda. Great to have you here. Okay, I think we're gonna get started, just so we have time to get through everything tonight. Just a quick intro. Hi, my name is Nikki. Welcome to my kitchen where I'm doing this Facebook Live. And we're in my kitchen today because we're going to be talking about eating more plants. So why exactly we're talking about this is, well, hopefully marketing and everything has worked and promoted healthy eating recently. I know things like vegetarianism, veganism have been everywhere on like my social media feeds or in classes at medical school. We're learning about how healthy diets are really important, but we don't always learn about exactly why. So some fun facts about that is that plants are really great for you for a couple of reasons. They're really high in fiber, which can help lower LDL cholesterol. And LDL cholesterol, if you've ever talked to your doctor about it, is the quote-unquote bad cholesterol. It just means that it's high levels of LDL cholesterol are associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So if we can eat more plants to lower those levels of LDL cholesterol, that's definitely a bonus for our long-term health and protecting us against chronic diseases. We can also help protect us against other diseases, not necessarily just cardiovascular disease. One example is diabetes. And they're also really good for our digestion. Having a lot of fiber in our diet is something that's really overlooked a lot of the time, but it's really good for our digestion, and our gut loves it when we have high levels of fiber. Another reason why plants are really good for you is that they're high in polyphenols. And polyphenols are a kind of antioxidant. So antioxidants help protect our cells against cell damage. And so that the high levels of antioxidants in plants can help contribute to how they protect against cardiovascular disease. In fact, if you compare your diet when you're eating high levels of processed meats to more plants, just studies have found that consuming just a little bit less animal protein and a little bit more plant protein has a really big payoff in terms of illness risk and death risk. So those are great stats. I don't have the exact numbers from the study, but I think it was just replacing like 1 or 2 meals of meat intake with plants instead. So in this live, I'm not telling anybody to go vegetarian because diets are so personal and you should do what works for you. I'm just advocating eating more plants in our everyday diet and trying to reduce our meat intake because meat, especially some processed meats, can lead to an increased risk of diabetes or heart disease. The consumption levels and the disease levels can be associated with each other. For example, one reason why this might be occurring is processed meats tend to be really high or higher in saturated fats, which are less beneficial for our heart than polyunsaturated or monounsaturated monounsaturated fats that we tend to find in plants. So just something like switching our diet so that one day or one night a week we're eating something that's mostly just plants instead of animal protein can be really, really beneficial for our health in the long term. So tonight we're going to get into the demonstration. I'm going to be making curried lentils, which is one of my favorite recipes. It's definitely a staple in my rotation. So just some things that I did before to set up, but you can, usually when I cook this, I do it all at the same time and it's a little bit chaotic, but it's actually a very easy recipe. It doesn't take a lot of time. I just made lentils before we started. So this was 1 cup of dried lentils that I simmered in 3 cups of water with a bay leaf and a teaspoon of bouillon powder. And I've also got rice cooking in a rice cooker on the side. So what we're going to be doing is turning this into kind of a curry with lots of veggies that we can then serve over rice. So I'm going to try tilt this down a little bit so you can see my setup. So this recipe is awesome because it's super forgiving. Like, I mess up things all the time. I don't like to measure in the kitchen, but this recipe basically lets you put whatever you need into it and you can use whatever veggies you have on hand. So first step, what we're going to do, I start off with 2 tablespoons approximately, again, I don't really like to measure, of olive oil, or you could use butter or any other oil. And I'm just going to heat that up. And I've got, cooking show style, I've got my ingredients mostly prepped. I've got half of an onion here. Doesn't matter what kind of onion. Again, I just use whatever I have on hand. So I'm going to toss this in and let the onion soften for a couple minutes, and then we'll add in some more veggies. So when I started my plant eating journey, I was a little bit daunted and I had no idea where to start. So some tips that I found really helpful were trying to do 1 day a week of meatless meals, and then as I got more comfortable with that, I would increase the number of days that I was doing that, so that now my diet has mostly just plants. I don't really like to label it. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily all vegetarian, but I would say most of what I eat is plants, and I've definitely never been in better health, so it's great. Also, some interesting misconceptions about when you're eating mostly plants. Again, I'm not saying that anybody has to eat mostly plants, but when you add more plants into your diet, a lot of people get the concern that you're not getting enough protein, because plant protein is a little bit harder to come by than animal protein. Same with iron. So it is definitely possible to get tons of protein with a or in a plant meal. And the key to that is having a variety of sources. So for example, lentils are a really good source of protein. Another good source of protein is tofu or soy products. And soy is great because it's a complete protein, which means it contains all 20 amino acids that your body cannot produce itself. So sometimes what's hard to get with plant sources of proteins is that they won't all have all of these 20 amino acids. So they're not complete proteins, which is why eating a variety of different plant-based sources of proteins is really important. So lentils, beans, chickpeas, tofu are my favorites. I also eat a lot of eggs as other sources of protein. Another good thing that I found really helpful was trying to just aim for 5 servings of fruits or vegetables in a day. And I found that when I did that, it really increased the my plant intake, and it made it really easy to kind of break it down and make it less daunting. So while these simmer, for example, one serving would be something like 1 medium fruit. That's 1 apple or 1 banana, 1 orange. It could also be a slice of a much larger fruit, so like a slice of a melon, or something like a handful of strawberries. Dried fruit also works really well, but with dried fruit, because everything is much more concentrated, the serving size for 1 serving is much smaller. So, back to what we're cooking. I don't know if you can see it, if I move this out of the way, but our onions are getting soft. They're doing pretty well. So I'm going to add in, I have about 1.5 to 2 carrots that I chopped up. You can use any vegetables in this recipe. I'm just using my favorites right now. So I'll be using onions, carrots, a pepper, and some kale to go in with the lentils. So we can go ahead and add those carrots in and let them soften as well. And while we do that, I'm just going to chop up our pepper. If anybody has a really good way to chop peppers, let me know in the comments, because I just kind of wing it every time. Another interesting fun fact about getting iron from plant sources. So it's harder to get iron from plants than it is from animals, and that's because the kind of iron that exists in plants is called non-heme iron, which is a little bit more difficult for our bodies to absorb. However, if you pair your plant-based sources of iron with vitamin C, so a source of vitamin C, then it can help your body absorb the iron much better. So some plant-based sources of iron are like dark leafy greens, so spinach, kale, Swiss chard. Those are really good ones. In addition, lentils have them, and some other like pulses have them, and those all count as parts of your 5 servings of fruits and veggies a day. So the more plants you eat, the more chances that you're going to have all of the nutrients that your body needs and hit that goal of eating 5 servings of fruits or veggies in a day. So we're just going to finish chopping up this pepper, and then I'm going to toss that in. I do it a little bit later because carrots take longer to cook and soften than peppers do. another fun tip is that I just try to make my meals as colorful as possible. So if there's a lot of colors on my plate, then I know I'm eating a lot of plants and I'm doing good things for my cardiovascular health. Okay, so just toss everything in. Like that. So if you can see right now, we're basically cooking up a rainbow. It's hard with the lighting. There we go. But all of these are eventually going to get mixed in with the lentils, and then we're going to put some spices and curry powder on it, and some other seasonings to make a really great, yummy curry. So the other vegetable I'm going to put in is kale. I've already washed it and ripped it from the stalks. This is about half of a bunch of kale that you would find from the grocery store. And the meal we're making today, with the same measurements that I put in, so like 1 cup of lentils that I then cook, that makes about 3 or 4 servings. So what I like to do, because I'm just cooking for myself, is I will either keep it in the fridge. It keeps really well in the fridge for about 4 days. And then you just know that you have good sources of plants on hand, and it's really easy to eat more plants when you have them prepped and ready to go. Alternatively, one thing that I'll probably do today is I'll put some of it in the freezer to meal prep for next week. So again, it's nice to know that you always have plant-based food on hand, and that's going to make it easier to swap out some of your animal protein-based meals with plants instead. So I'll just pop that all in. And I'm going to add a little bit of broth to this, just to make everything cook down a bit better. Okay, so as everything cooks down, I'm just going to add a little bit of salt. The salt is totally optional. I also cooked my lentils with a little bit of salt, which again, if you're being mindful of your heart health, you might want to, decrease the salt. So it's totally up to you. This recipe really has basically no measurements. Oh, and I should mention, I did adapt the recipe from the cookbook, More with Less. So that's just a cookbook that has a bunch of recipes where it's taking staples in your kitchen and turning them into delicious meals, and it's budget friendly. And that's another great thing about eating plants. I find that I definitely save a lot more money when I'm buying like plant-based sources of proteins like cans of chickpeas or stuff than when I'm buying like chicken. So good for our hearts, good for the rest of our body, and also really good for our wallets. Okay, so in the last few minutes of our live, we've added some salt. I'm going to add a little bit of pepper. There's no more pepper in there, but if you want to add pepper, feel free. And I'm going to take our lentils that were cooked before, and I'm going to add them into the mix. Again, you can use literally whatever vegetables you want. It does smell very good in here. You can use whatever vegetables you want. I've tried it with broccoli, I've tried it with spinach, and again, any kind of lentils that you have on hand. So I'm using green lentils right now, just because that's what I had, but I've tried them with red lentils. It all works out, so it's very forgiving. And everything's combined together, so we're just gonna add some spices. Again, this part is totally up to you. I like to make mine with curry powder. So if you want to make it a little bit spicy, you can go ahead and add 1 to 2 tablespoons of curry powder, or more if you like things really spicy. And give that a stir. I find the curry powder makes the biggest difference in transforming this from just a plate of lentils, which could be kind of boring and not as exciting as like a piece of chicken or some steak, into a meal that's really interesting, and it's really warming and it's good for you. And it shows that eating plants isn't always just eating salads, because salads can be boring sometimes. There's a lot of ways to eat more plants that are more fun than salads. And I had some tips for this live. My favorite things to do is to eat stews in the winter, so I'll make lentil stews, or curries. So curries out of like seasonal vegetables are really great. For example, like a squash curry or something with sweet potatoes. And soups are a really good way to add them in too. You can also use smoothies as a quick and easy way to get more fruits into your diet. I'm also just going to add 1 more teaspoon of cumin. Again, this part's totally optional. You can just go with salt and pepper or some other herbs if you want something a little bit more neutral on your palate. But I'm going to go with more of a curry taste. So I've added my spices right there. Basically eating a rainbow again, as I said before, which is a good way to know that we've got a lot of plants in our diet. And the last thing I'm going to do is I just have a lemon here, and I'm going to cut it in half, and this part is totally up to taste, but usually the juice of about half a lemon is enough for the amount of lentils we have in this recipe. So I'm going to go ahead and squeeze the juice from this lemon into our pan. Okay. So this way, with the vitamin C from the lemon, we can better absorb any sources of iron from the lentils. Peppers are also a really good source of vitamin C. Things that impair vitamin C absorption from plants would be like coffee or tea. Anything with caffeine makes it harder for your body to absorb iron. So if you're trying to eat more plants at your meal and you want to make sure that you're getting everything, it might be a good idea to maybe have tea a few hours before or a few hours after, so that you can let your body fully absorb everything. So this is our finished product right here. You can taste it, add whatever you want to add in, like if it needs more salt, if you want pepper in it instead, absolutely do that. Again, it's very forgiving. I hope this inspired you to consider eating more plants in your diet, maybe switching to a meatless Monday, or I guess tonight's Tuesday, so meatless Tuesday situation. And yeah, happy cooking, happy eating. Let me know if you have any questions. Happy to answer them now. And I'm just planning on serving this curry over rice. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Happy cooking. Have a lovely Tuesday night.